I it's very interesting. I believe, and my belief comes from the first letter of the Colossians and Paul, where he says that gifts are given to different people in the community for different things. And he says those who have the gift of charity do charity, and those who have a gift of preaching preach, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in a Roman Catholic tradition, there's the assumption that when you impose hands and give orders, that that gift is given. And I don't believe so. I believe, like Paul, that it's a freely given gift to somebody in the community for the benefit of a community, and that the community is the one who affirms that charisma. Uh, Being one who sits most often on the pew side for many, many years, being a Roman Catholic, a cradle Roman Catholic, for many years I've heard lousy preachers. Preachers that did not have the gift, preachers who did not either respect the Word of God or respected the community because they had not prepared the homily. So I'm very conscious of that when I do preach, that I am very focused on the Word of God. I think when you preach, you have to respect the message of the gospel or the other readings. It's regardless of which one it is. I started preaching, oh God, probably over 30 years ago. I worked in the diocese at diocesan level for 19 years. And then I was a pastoral administrator for the Roman Catholic community of the 19th Ward. No, I'm sorry, pastoral business manager was the way Bob Worth called me. And when I started working at the Office of Human Development at that point, today everybody knows it like Catholic Charity, and we've changed names 10 zillion times. A lot of the time that I did preaching was promoting either a program or a collection or something like that. But I always felt that it was disrespectful not to encompass in my preaching some of the message that was in the gospel. So even though it was a promotion, I always tried to give a little bit of the message that was in the readings. It started, as I said, about 30 years ago. It was affirmed. A lot of people, even if my message was very short, a lot of people came to me and said, good job, why don't you come back? So I did have some pastors that asked me to come back and preach, a lot of times in the area of social ministry, because that was my area of work in the diocese. Now, for the last I left the diocese. I left the diocese, went to work for the Roman Catholic community of the 19th Ward. In the Roman Catholic community of the 19th Ward, I was in the cycle of preaching. Father Bob Worth had me and two more women preaching as a regular preacher kind of thing. And again, I enjoyed it a lot. During that time, I started getting my MDiv at St. Bernard's. And what was very interesting for me was that you have to take homiletics. And my teacher of homiletics went down through the mechanicals of what I needed to do. And then you were supposed to go and preach and give the people of a congregation an evaluation form. And what was very interesting is that the people who before liked what I preach said to me, "You've changed your style, that's not good for you." So they said, no, go back to your old self, do not preach that way. So I did go back to my old self, and I preached in the cycle till I left Roman Catholic community of the 19th Ward for Miami. My mother and parents were elderly, and my husband had retired from Kodak and went back to take over a business for some friends. And I've been in Miami now for 13 years. Now, during my time in Miami, the church is very, very conservative. Even though it's amazing, churches are full compared to churches here. I mean, we were going to one church, was a 2-tier, and on the 11 o'clock Mass, they filled both tiers of a church. But none still wear their habits, and of course, don't even think of anybody other than the priest preaching. So then, 3.5 years ago, my sister, Dr. Ada Marisa Cidias, died. Ada was a mujerista theologian, very well known throughout the world. And unfortunately, we lost her in 40 days to cancer. And Ada had, since she started living in New York City, worshiped at a parish in Harlem, Spanish Harlem, which is Our Lady Queen of the Angels. That parish was closed by the Archdiocese in 2006. Most to the detriment and sadness of the community. As a matter of fact, they arrested like about 20 people in the community who sat inside the church, and to empty it, they arrested her. Ada stayed with the community, and the community up to this date, every Sunday, celebrates the liturgical celebration on the sidewalk, and they're now known as the Sidewalk Church. So Ada, they had a memorial service when Ada passed away. We took Ada's body from New York to Miami, and she's buried by my parents in Miami. And they had a memorial service for Ada, and they were very, very depressed because they said, well, none of us knows enough theology to open up the Word of God, so what are we going to do now? So I promised, I mean, they knew that I was also a theologian, not as good as my sister. I mean, she's well known. But they asked me, please. I said, okay, let's do a deal. I'll do a Sunday reflection for you on the gospel, and if you like it, then I'll continue doing it. So I've been doing that now for 3.5 years. And every Sunday, as a matter of fact, even when we travel, and since my husband and I are retired, we travel enough, I always leave them enough homilies for the rest of the Sundays. So the congregation is Hispanic. It is very interesting. The Pope is going to the school of that parish. They did not close the school. So they have plans to do a little bit of harassment at that point. Let's see, by the time this, goes on, we will see if the Pope would do something or other type of thing. But it's a congregation that is very strong. There's a lady who's 91 years old, and her hair is all white, and she was one of the ones that was arrested, and she's the strongest person you've ever seen. Anyways, that's my story of preaching kind of thing. I think what was very interesting for me was that Pope Francisco, in his encyclica, The Joy of the Gospel, spent a whole chapter about how people should preach. And it was, for me, absolutely flabbergasted to see that he had the same ideas, or that I have the same ideas that he has. My aim in preaching is threefold. One is I like to make sure that I give enough exegesis that I put in context the gospel. As we know, gospels are little pieces that we read on Sundays are little pieces. So I always like to give enough background so that people understand where that is coming from. My second point is I never try to make a sermon any longer than between 7 and 10 minutes. Psychology tells us that that's all that human beings can grasp. And my experience is that all those preachers that spend hours preaching, I turn them off after the first 5 minutes, and that's the end of the story. So I try for people not to turn me off, and I preach. I try it never to be any longer than 5 to 7 minutes. And the third one is I always try to apply the message of the gospel to what's going on in the community, what's going on to the individual people. And for me, that is very important because I think that's the whole idea of reading the Word of God. That is, that it can guide your life. Preaching has done for me two things. One is it has challenged me tremendously. When you're up there talking about what the Word says or preparing for what you want to say, I think that's a picture that you look at your life and say, I'm saying this, but am I doing it? So I think it's a very great challenge. And I have a story that is very interesting. During my work in the diocese, there was a sister-diocese relationship between the Diocese of Rochester and the Diocese of Tabasco in Mexico. And we had a missionary team in Mexico. and I was the supervisor for the missionary team. So I used to travel back and forth. And every time I got there, since Spanish is my first language and it was not for the missionaries, they immediately said, "You're preaching till you leave." So I started doing that. And one day I had to have a very strong confrontation with one of the members of a missionary team. And after that, the mass was held, and I had to preach about forgiveness. And that, I mean, in my own Spanish way, I was madder than mad, and just trying to preach was such a hard experience. So I think that encompasses what I say by challenge type of thing. My second thing is, especially this last 3 years, where I have to every week, and as I said to Bishop Clark, and Monday comes too fast, and he says, "Oh, that was what happened to me when I wrote the columns." You know, I have learned much more and appreciated much more the Word. I mean, it's you read the commentaries and you see that out of one message, different people have different messages to read. And I think it's fantastic that we have many voices and not only one voice. And again, as I say, orders does not give you the gift.